Okay, welcome to Illo Talk, and today I'm interviewing Eric Orchard, and I'll play a little intro music here while we get started, and then we're going to jump in.
Illo Talk interviews.
Great. So, hi Eric, how's it going?
I'm great, Corey. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent.
Good.
So we're broadcasting live, and if anybody wants to jump into the chat, you can just hit that up on YouTube, or if you want to use the hashtag IlloTalkChat on Twitter, then we will see that, and we'll try to get all those questions and comments into the show. But let's get started. Eric, I've been following you on Twitter and reading some of your books for a few years, so this is kind of surreal to meet you, not in person, but face to face. It's kind of an odd experience for me.
Well, you work alone. I work alone, just sort of out of my studio, and it's sort of remarkable to me that anyone's even noticing. So it's very encouraging to hear that people are actually following what I'm doing. I work hard and I really care about what I'm doing, so it's really nice to have a sense that there's a community out there.
Yeah, and that is that's something that's interesting for a lot of creatives. Is we're kind of in these little isolation bubbles that we create for ourselves, somewhat out of necessity, just because it's difficult to create, in a busy environment. But then also it can be a little isolating and kind of strange. So yeah, it is. I agree. It's kind of I don't know what you would say there, but it's kind of reassuring to know that there are other human beings in the universe out there.
Yeah, thank goodness for Twitter and Facebook in that sense. I mean,
right?
Maybe not Facebook these days, but I mean, it's I don't know what artists did in the past. I suppose they had more contact with their editors. That's what I'm going to guess. But
yeah, and they're such a lot of like the bullpen environment and stuff like that is kind of shared studio space.
That's true too. Yeah, I guess the shape of things were different back then. They would share spaces. I've been offered to share studio space before, but I've never taken up on it because I have kids. I would work at home,
right? Rather
than so I could find some sort of weird balance where I could watch the kids and then sneak off to draw. But the bullpen thing is kind of enticing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm not. I don't collaborate a lot, but working with other people, working on different projects, might be a really great thing.
Yeah, I'd like to get to that because you do a ton of the stuff on your own, whereas a lot of people have teams of people that produce what you do. But before we do that, could you take me just real quick? Take me through your kind of history. I mean, did you start out working on your own, or did you transition from a day job to working on your own? How did that work out for you?
I think I've always just been stubbornly creative. In junior high school, I started publishing my own mini comics and selling them, and I started to find avenues to get them out internationally.
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved it. I loved reaching people with stories and art right from the start. So I did that for a few years at a high school, and then I went to art school and planned to get into picture books.
Mm-hmm.
Because that seemed the most viable avenue, and I still think it is one of the more viable avenues for art illustrators. And so I did, after art school, my last year of art school, I got my first book contract, which was a picture book called The Terrible, Horrible, Smelly Pirate. And I was actually continuing to do mini comics the whole time. And while I was doing picture books early on, Matty Kettle sort of came out of my sketches and mini comics. And I got that in at Top Shelf out of Georgia. So I found myself doing both picture books, illustrating books, and doing comics at the same time. And then I got in with someone noticed my work over at Tor Macmillan, and they asked me to collaborate with the author Jeff Vandermeer, and we collaborated on. I turned one of his stories into a comic. If you don't know the name, he did. The movie Annihilation is based on his book. and so that was a big leap into really big name publishing. And Callista Brill, who's an editor at Macmillan, First Second, which is the comic book part of Macmillan, or she had been following my work when she was working at Hyperion Disney, and she got a job at Macmillan, and I met her at a breakfast meeting for creatives in Toronto, and we both expressed interest in working together, and that's how Bera happened. Yeah, other than that, I've just been doing illustrations and commissions and writing. So that's kind of my career in a nutshell. It's an abridged version.
That's awesome. This is always a weird question, but I like to ask it.
Good.
So, if you had a time machine, and you could travel back to any point in time, what point in time would you travel back to, and what would you tell yourself at that point?
Oh my gosh! So it was like quantum leap within my own life.
Right. Yeah. Except you can control it, and Ziggy's not there.
Gosh. Huh. Oh, this might be a disappointing answer. I'd probably go back to my teenage self and say, be less selfish.
Okay.
Just, take other people's, be more empathetic.
Yeah.
Take other people's feelings and needs into account more. But then I'd go back further and tell my 12-year-old self that I'll be a successful bookmaker. So that would make up for that.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. Mm-hmm. That's cool. So in your work, you do all of the coloring, all the inking, all the penciling, all the lettering as well? I
do not do the lettering.
You don't.
They won't let me.
They won't let you.
I've tried. They won't let me.
Okay.
I don't have the design gene. I have a deficit. So I've tried. And I do letter my own like mini comics and stuff. I think it looks okay, but it's kind of wonky. It's my lettering is I read too many Sandman comics in my teenage years. And what's his name? Todd Klein, the letterer. Is it Todd Klein?
I think so.
He would just change up the lettering for every character and be really expressive through his lettering. And I was really inspired by that. And for kids' books, they wanted lettering that was a little more consistent than what I was offering. I'm okay with that because it's a little bit less work that I have to do. Right.
Yeah, for sure. And so so you're doing everything but the lettering and of course the book design and all that. That's somebody else.
That's correct.
But how do you do that? I find in my own process, and I don't know if this is the same. I know this is different for everybody, and everybody works differently. But for me, I'm working on a children's book right now, and I'm all over the place. I'll be working on 5 different pages at once, and various stages of penciling and inking and coloring, and I kind of approach it kind of in this chaotic way of whatever I'm in the mood for at the time. Do you find you work more methodically, or are you more?
Okay, I'll say this with a caveat. I'm very methodical, but every artist should work to whatever process works best for them. Like that's sort of been a constant refrain for me. I don't want people to copy me if it's counterintuitive to their own thinking.
Sure.
Some people really work well in that all over the place chaotic way, and you can be very successful that way. I need steps. So I need to do one thing and then another thing and then another thing, and it's all laid out for me. And I write down extensive notes to myself. I do checklists, and I run through one thing after the other, starting with the writing. So right now I'm working on 2 books. One is a comic and one is an illustrated novel. And I have these extensive checklists, both on my phone and on sheets of paper that I can refer to. And for the comic, I've written it, and I'm penciling it now. So I've been able to check off the script, the thumbnails, and now where I'm in the middle of the pencils. And I do 1 page at a time, And this might be actually detrimental to me, because if I could jump around more, I might get stuff done quicker. But I'm very, very one step in front of the other.
And so do you do the entire book that way, where you pencil all of the pages, or do you go through stages on each page?
I'm doing my new book a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
But previously, yes, I've done all of the pencils, all of the inks, and then all of the coloring. I think it just appeals to me to do it that way. And I'm penciling the new book right now, and some of the characters, I'm on page 10 of pencils, and some of the characters have already changed radically from page 1.
Right.
So it's kind of has its uses. I can alter character design as I go along if I don't start inking right away.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's a practical thing, and it's also a safe thing.
Mm-hmm.
And these books are big commitments for me. I'm slow. Some books take years, so I want them to be right. Like I want to ensure that I'm not taking too many unsafe risks. Like I'll take risks, but they're pretty calculated.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And talk to me about your coloring. It looks like watercolor. Are you doing that traditionally?
Yeah. So my second book, Bara, the One-Headed Troll, was all done, primarily done with watercoloring and gouache, actually.
Oh.
Maddie Kettle, my first book, was all digital.
Uh-huh.
The coloring, and I did that myself. That's Photoshop. My picture books have been both digital, watercolor, and mixed. So for the watercolor, I bought very expensive watercolor paper, Arches, hot press 300 GSM,
Mm-hmm.
and did all the artwork on that, and then just paint it right onto it. There's probably better ways to do it, and I thought about it, but I find that digitally things can take me longer because there's so many options. I get lost in it. So there's a sense of finiteness with traditional media, where you put down your colors and you have to work with your mistakes rather than being able to infinitely change your mistakes.
Yeah.
And I just find, for me personally, that's a benefit because it makes me move on. Having said that, like, I look at Bara now and I can see glaring mistakes. So, maybe another way would have been better. I don't know.
Well, and I think that's always going to be the case, that we see, we're probably our own worst critics, and we see the
That's
worst.
True.
But that's a pretty ballsy way of doing it. I don't know. For me, I came from digital, and I'm moving into traditional.
Right.
But I still colored digitally. But I think if I were to move into color, I would probably. It's a pretty bold move to just color right in your inks. I would probably print it out.
I thought about doing that. It became a time constraint,
right,
and also a financial constraint, because the printed out pages would have to be good enough paper
right,
to paint on.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to buy paper twice.
Right.
And also I love the aesthetics of mixing media on one page. And I think I was just being stubborn. I just wanted to see what I could do on one page. And I would use the gouache in areas where there was no detail, and I would use the watercolor in areas where there was hatching. So that way I was pretty sure I wouldn't ruin anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was supposed to be in more color, but I ran out of time.
Yeah.
Time's an issue.
Yeah, it looks great, and I often think that those constraints that we sometimes feel like get in our way, tend to help the project. Because given an infinite amount of time, I don't know that any of us would ever finish anything. I just noodle with it forever or whatever. But
yeah. Well, when I first got Photoshop and Manga Studio, I was working on a pitch that never got off the ground, and I was doing a drawing for it, and I was like zooming in so deep, and just fascinated by how much detail and correction and editing I could do. And it is like, I'm, you know, analog, traditional, my work is pretty, you know, it's pretty detailed and pretty, I put a lot of work into it, but it just, I could just go in down the rabbit hole with digital.
Oh yeah.
So I kind of reserve it for other things like editing, traditional work, and coloring. But you know, you look at Android Jones' work, and he's like down the rabbit hole in a really neat way.
Yeah.
Like his stuff, it's just infinite detail. It's marvelous, but it's just not. That's not what I'm going for. And also, I like the look of something handmade. I think that comes out of going to art school, where handmade was very prized in art school.
Mm-hmm.
The one when I went, and I gained a real appreciation for it. And I also was really fascinated by combinations of digital and analog, like the artist Rick Barry would do oil painting and then digitally manipulate it afterwards. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And so I wanted to do it with watercolor. And then later, I think Tony Ditterlitzy was doing that as well, and other like illustrators. So it kind of became like, he did that with, I remember the first time I noticed him doing that was with The Spider and the Fly. And I get really excited about ideas. So it's not just practicality, although that does come into it, but I get excited about what people are doing. And I'm like, I got to try that.
Yeah.
So Ditterlitzy was doing this really cool stuff with transparencies on The Spider and the Fly. And I was like, geez, I want to do that too. And Rick Barry was doing cool stuff like stretching and manipulating. And of course, Dave McKean, who I'm a big fan of also. He'll do stuff that's purely digital, but my favorite stuff by him is when he combines to digital and analog.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're inking, and we've got a question in the chat I want to get to in a minute.
Sure.
When you're inking, your line work is incredible. I mean, it has so much humanity to it. And I actually saw an interaction that you had on Twitter as I was lurking.
Okay.
And
lurk away.
Yeah, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody suggested that you could use a digital brush to cheat a lot of the hashing that you do, because you have thousands and thousands and thousands of tiny little lines in your ink work. And your response was, I will absolutely never do that. What can I ask, what tools are you using, and what is it about not cheating that portion of it that is kind of important to you?
You know, I think, well, part of it is, and there's a practical side to this, is that I sell my originals. Mm-hmm. And sales of originals are an extremely important part of revenue stream for me.
Yeah.
It's at least half of my revenue, because it does take me time to do my books. So I did do one book, a picture book for a company out here on the East Coast, and I did it all digitally. And I did try the cloning in a lot of detail.
Sure.
And I didn't like the result. I wasn't happy with it.
Yeah.
It felt, I'm not gonna say it didn't feel like cheating, because it's a perfectly legitimate way to work.
Sure.
But for me personally, I wasn't happy. It's not the look I'm going for, because cloned hatching looks like cloned hatching to me, in a lot of ways. You know, it's very much like, you know, So, you know, essentially, I've tried it and I didn't like it, and I need to sell the originals.
Sure.
So I'm going to go with that. And you asked what I use to ink with, and I usually I'll sometimes, like, Barrow was all inked with a dip pen, so like a Hunt 107, I think, and FW Speedball, super black India ink, awesome stuff. It's so black.
Yeah.
but when I use that stuff, I'm always covered in ink, and my light switches in my house are black, and it gets out of control. But I love it. I'll use brush and ink and dipping, and I was concerned that the dip brush. I was concerned that if I used disposable pens or markers, that the watercolor would hide it. Whereas you actually, when you're writing with drawing with a dip pen, it's so sharp that you're often scoring the paper, leaving a more permanent mark that the watercolor will sit on top of in a more pleasant way. Mm-hmm. As you can tell, I'm really fascinated by analog stuff too. Yeah. So it's just, I love analog. It's just a thing. And I also use these, the microns.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sure like everyone knows. I use a 0.005. People have been for years trying to get me to do ones. people will literally argue with me. Someone on Twitter just yesterday said, "Don't hatch, do washes." And I was like, "But that's not my work."
Right? Yeah.
So and I do want to add too that I do have different styles. Like sure. I'm not just the hatching guy. I can do wash. Mm-hmm. I can do. Maurice Sendak had a quote, like the children's book guy. He would say, have different styles. Have a detailed style. Have a thin style. Have a fat style. Mm-hmm. Just make sure you have something for every occasion. And that's what I feel like I'm doing. But I'm just, I mean, I happen to really like the hatching. So that just seems to be what comes out the most.
Yeah, and how much of that at this point is kind of subconscious autonomic, and how much of it is thought? Because I noticed I was looking at Bear the One-Headed Troll last night, and a lot of your modeling, a lot of those lines are following the contour of the shape. They're flowing. They're flowing with the image. A lot of the background is leading towards kind of the focal point and helping with the flow, and so it's not just random texture, right?
It's not. Two things are happening there, and one of them is happening at the penciling stage. Uh-huh. When I pencil my work before it's inked, I do these really broad lines, and through lines in the page, and I pencil a page like a whole, like a whole piece. Mm-hmm. So it's the penciling tells me how to hatch, and when I'm hatching, I can turn my brain off a bit because it's all there, it's all laid out for me. But it does get a bit thinky. Like I do have to sort of consider it while I'm inking. Yeah. But yes, it's less of an intellectual thinky thing than the penciling is. Inking is when the podcasts go on, and the music blasts, and I can think about sunny days and nice things.
Right. So, yeah. Right. So so as you're making those decisions in the penciling stages, what kind of thought process are you going through as far as composition and page flow, and maybe this is a two-part question. I've often found it fascinating on how artists train themselves to stop, because we tend to I could continue to work until I ruin the piece, right?
Yeah.
So how do you know when to abandon it in a good place, and how much of that is informed by the penciling stage, and how much of that is during the inks?
Oh, that's a good question. I think a lot of it is sort of intuitive, and it comes just with experience. Mm-hmm. A lot of questions can be answered that way. It's a tough one, because it's just a lot of it is just you're training your eye over time. And I want to show you this too, because also at the thumbnailing stage, I'm already making those decisions. Yeah. So these are thumbnails for my new book, and I'm already, like doing arches of blacks, and then swirls down here. So it's happening even at that stage. I'm working on how things move in the page, and how abstract it is. There's an abstract component to it, definitely. I took painting in art school. I actually don't have a drawing degree. I have a painting degree with a minor in art history. And I barely remember anything my professor said. But one thing that did come away was like every square inch of an image should work. So when you compose a composition, everything needs to work together. Every part of the page, every square inch, and that's important to me. It's even hard to put into words what I'm doing because it's not really quantifiable. It's just sort of like, this looks nice to me.
Right.
This swirls nicely, you know? So I'm not pulling out any references to like ancient Greek mathematical, geometrical.
You're not getting out your Fibonacci ruler.
Formula. Yeah, it's just, this looks cool.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And that's a lot. That's it. Like, so I'm just at the thumbnailing stage. I'm trying to make stuff look cool.
Yeah, but a lot of that, of course, is informed by your years of training and studying.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you just woke up one day and you know what looks cool. You know.
No.
Yeah,
no, that's true too. And I think some people are blessed with that eye earlier.
Sure.
You know, I'm not saying I was, but you see like really young artists and they've already got a sense of composition.
Right.
So I think, you know, composition is like a talent that some people really, you can work on it and get it, and some people are just born really early with it. I assume the same thing goes for like being a mechanic. Some people are just born with a good mechanical eye, or engineers are, you know, it requires training, but some people maybe are more apt to that sort of work.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm guessing. I have no idea.
So
it's
I
a
think,
fascinating concept to me, but yeah.
Yeah, I think people have certain proclivities to different things, you know, and lean different ways. But I also balance that with I think things can be learned, you know, and so there's.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I could learn how to be an accountant, but I would hate it. You know what I mean? Like I think there's we each have kind of a calling or series of callings. You know, from whatever standpoint you want to look at that. And if you ignore that, you're going to be unhappy.
I think so too. They talk about that in The Alchemist, the book The Alchemist.
Oh yeah.
They almost use the terms you're using, and I do think we're drawn to something. But at the same time, I've been talking about this a lot on Twitter and Patreon, and I feel it's really important that everybody feels a part of the creative conversation in the world, especially with social media. And I don't want anyone to feel left out or like they can't contribute either by creating things or discussing things. And I found a great quote from Tom York of Radiohead, just yesterday, talking about this, and I can't repeat it because it's got the F word in it. But it basically says, like, you know, so you can play guitar. Like, so what? Anybody can play guitar. He's referencing one of the songs in the first album, but like anyone can learn to draw.
Yeah,
it's not a special thing, and you know, and it's really what you do with it. And increasingly, I'm finding it less special of a talent. I do it because I love it, not because I want to feel special. And I think in the past I wanted to feel special. You know, I'll own up to being vain, but nowadays I'm especially with social media and talking to people and seeing things like people's Tumblrs and Pinterests and Facebook and Twitters, where they're doing this amazing job of curating and creating content. You know, that's legitimately amazing. And they have an eye for things, and they're shaping the creative realm that we all inhabit. And I think it's wonderful that we can all have a part in it. And anyone can draw. Anyone can contribute to this great thing. Yeah.
I'm going to take a question from our viewers here. Elvin asks, what are your thoughts of the storytellings that was used in the games these days? Yeah.
So I'm more of a Nintendo fan. He's talking video games, not board games, right?
I would assume,
Yeah. So, 'cause I'm a big board gamer too. But, and Japanese, gosh, you know, like Japanese style video game stories are so different than American style stories.
Right.
Where Japanese ones, oftentimes, there's more hand holding to get you to understand. But Yeah, I think there's a level of sophistication now that's really interesting.
Hmm.
And I think they're really coming into their own. Story wise, I still prefer being told a story over an interactive story, and I think they're so different. I took my son to a virtual reality arcade on March break, and I'd never done virtual reality before, and I was so excited by the possibilities, but I wasn't excited necessarily by the narrative possibilities, um, which are there. But I find other stuff about virtual reality more interesting, like it's just cool to shoot down spaceships. I don't even need a story to think
Right.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Like or I got to be Batman standing on a in Arkham, in Gotham City, standing on top of a building, and man, that was cool. I
Yeah.
don't know, like I've said this before that I'm not sure stories need to be emphasized in video games that much, but I could be proven wrong. I know Neil Gaiman has been dipping his feet into video games, and a lot of authors are. And of course, the Witcher games are based on books, and I find that really interesting. I kind of like that. Like, video games seem to be taking steps into sort of being the new movie,
Hmm.
like taking the place of film in some ways. I'm not sure if that's going to happen completely or not, but anyway, okay, I'm officially rambling.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no, I look at it. I look at it a different way, and
Yeah,
this might offend this might offend hardcore gamers, but
yeah,
I will usually turn the sound way down and listen to an
yeah,
audiobook or whatever, because
yeah,
for me gaming is that's what I do in my downtime in between stuff,
yeah,
and it's almost like like I would rather I would rather not. I usually skip cutscenes. I
yeah.
usually
Me too. Me too. It's very
and
visceral for me. It's like you're
yeah,
doing stuff. It's about doing stuff. I don't really want to collaborate with the creators to make a story. I can do that on my own, and I
right,
can read comics and books, and it's way more interesting to me. I want to do cool stuff in a video game,
yeah, exactly,
and but I'm the same, and maybe that's why I prefer Japanese video games, because you just you got these cool characters. It's character driven and it's
right.
fun. Like, I'm a big Nintendo fan.
Hmm.
Ridiculous. Um, I've only owned like a PlayStation, Nintendo, but played lots of Xbox and elsewhere, and played VR on the. I can't remember the VR system. Darn it! It's one
Is
of the
it
big ones.
is it
Not
Oculus?
It's not Oculus. It's the other one.
I haven't
Wh-
gotten into VR
I
too
can't
much.
remember. Can't remember. It looks cool. But anyway, yeah, I'm with you. But I also have friends that write for video games, and I'd love to talk to them about this.
Yeah,
I know someone who works for Ubisoft and as a writer, and I feel like I'm missing something too. Like, maybe it's just something. There's some
yeah.
subtle understanding that I'm missing. So I don't want to discredit stories either, but I also think it's okay for people to do different activities and get different things out of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and along those lines, I'm still like I'm playing Just Cause 3 right now. I don't know if you've played
Right.
that one. Have you played that one?
I haven't. I haven't. No.
Oh my gosh, it might be the best. If you like first person shooters, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Anyway, it might be my favorite game I've ever played. It says
Very
not to
cool.
go off on a tangent, but what it is
No, tangent
it's
away.
okay. If you take like total complete wish fulfillment
Okay.
and put
I
it
like it
into
already.
a third person shooter, it's like because I don't like I'm not a big fan of like the negative aspects of Grand Theft Auto or whatever. Like
No, no,
I don't want to go like sleep with a hooker and kill her and steal her money like that.
no. To me, that's kind of grotesque, and you get rewarded for that stuff.
Right.
But that's another story. Like, and I don't know. Gosh, I'm I find that gross. Yeah.
Me too. And I really identify with the character that I'm playing.
Yeah.
Especially it's an immersive world, and for me, that kind of stuff feels really weird. So what they've done is they have very similar gameplay where you can jump into vehicles and you can blow stuff
Okay.
up, but you are liberating this series of islands from this dictator. And so
Okay.
so you're a good guy doing very similar things to what you do in Grand Theft Auto, except you're killing
Right.
the oppressors. And so
And the gameplay is cool. Like,
and the gameplay is super cool. And then they add, you've got a grappling hook on your arm, and you have a wingsuit, kind of like Spider-Man, right, where you can just put your arms out and just kind of glide, and then you have a parachute. And so between those three things, the grappling hook, the wingsuit, and the parachute, you can kind of just glide and fly, almost like a flying squirrel, anywhere you want. And then you just add in insane weapons, like, you carry like a rocket launcher and a sniper rifle and guns and grenades, and you've got like radio detonated bombs, and so you're just like liberating people, which feels good rather than gross. But you can still like jump into vehicles and drive the vehicle off a cliff and then parachute away, and while you're parachuting, like lob grenades down at the base. And anyway, it gets... Oh no, we lost Eric. Okay. Give me just a moment. I will try to get him back. 1 second.
about that.
Oh, we're back. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay.
And I should let you know, my phone, the battery's drained really quickly.
Okay.
So I had to plug it in. So
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I'm sorry if there's audio issues.
No, that's fine.
I've got the new iPhone that only has the one that doesn't have a headphone jack. So.
Okay, yeah, not a problem. Just reframing the... Unfortunately, the way I have this set up, every time I... Come on. Let me use my different thing. Every time I come back over here like that. There we go.
My girlfriend just wrote me and said, "Stop rocking."
Dang it. Go back.
I was rocking nervously to...
I have that effect on people where I...
No, I was getting like anxious because I was down to 9%, and I was like, "Oh man."
Yeah. Anyway, I was just rambling about this video game, but yeah, there's it's a crazy game, and I play it on Steam. But if you're into any of that, it's pretty good. I would recommend it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
My son and I are really into like Mario and Kirby, and it's like I like that thing where it's not even the narrative's not important. It's more like the circumstance than a narrative.
Right. Yeah.
It's like here's a character, here's the world, boom.
Yeah, they have to get all the way to the right. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, let's jump back in. I was. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, we should mention Breath of the Wild.
I haven't played that.
Which is the first like real sandbox Nintendo game with where the narrative is up to you, which that's exciting. So
yeah.
I do want to talk about the fact that there can be extremely exciting developments in video games.
Yeah, and the concept of participating. I mean, it's almost like taking a choose your own adventure book, which was incredible back in the day. That I could shape the story. And making it like a fully immersive audio visual experience to where you really are participating. That is super exciting. The way that can go. Do you think any of that is going to inform children's books? I mean, there's been a number of apps, Reading Rainbow and others, that are trying to change the game. But it seems like, to me at least, it seems like no matter what people do to try to replace paper, people still want something tangible. Do you think that's ever going to go away, or do you think it's going to evolve?
Yeah, I don't know. I think like one of the smartest ways that I've seen approach to it is William Joyce.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know William Joyce's work?
Mm-mm.
He's one of my favorite illustrators and writers. He did 2 or 3 apps, and then they were brilliant, like just amazing. He opened up a production company Shreveport, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And he opened up a production company in Shreveport, and they make apps that are connected to his books. So the book comes out, and the book is sort of like a novelization of his apps. And the apps just sort of, it's just added content, and they're fun on their own, and they're different. And it's I think he did a really good job. My general feeling is that I can imagine printed books going away because I have a pretty big imagination, but I kind of don't think it'll happen.
Yeah.
Especially being a father, and the experience of reading a book in print with a child,
Mm-hmm.
it is really special.
Yeah,
And you want to be able to destroy the picture book.
right.
So I don't know. While I can imagine that kind of dismal future, to me that's a dystopia. No print books for kids.
Yeah.
While I can imagine it, I don't like it, and I think humans are very resistant to certain types of change.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's my rambling non-answer. But yeah.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think there's, and I don't know, this sounds strange, but I think there's actually something about the tactile experience. Oh, we lost Eric again. Okay, let me see if I can get him back. If you can hear me, jump in the call. But there's something about the tactile experience of touching the paper. You know, that you're connecting to trees, and you're able to kind of jump in and do. There's something about the fibers and the movement of that. Okay, just one moment. We're going to try to add Eric back in one more time here. I'm going to mute the desktop while that thing is ringing. Here's some... Hey!
Hi again.
There we go. We'll just do that a few times. All right, let me...
That's okay. I'm good.
Okay, let me switch back over. There we go. Okay, and then this reframe you.
I'll stay still here.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay.
I've just got to get a better setup than this. I thought this would work, but every time we disconnect. Okay, there we go. So yeah. So anyway, what I was saying is I think there's something about the natural aspect. I mean, there's studies, and they're a little bit spurious or whatever on the data, but being out in the woods, being out in nature tends to connect you to creativity. I think there's something about paper and books as well. I mean, I tell my students that they're not allowed to sketch digitally. They need to sketch on something, because there's something about the feeling of the paper on your hand as you're drawing and doing those things. I think it gives you kind of a sense of space that you're not just using your eyes. You can kind of track that movement and the speed, but also there's something deeper than that with the connection. And everybody knows how to turn a page. Everybody, my daughter at the youngest age was able to figure out how books worked, right?
I've heard books referred to as a perfect technology.
Yeah.
And while we don't think about them that way, it's absolutely the case. They're an ideal, perfect technology that were created to suit humans. Whereas much of our digital technology, humans have to adapt to suit the technology.
Right.
So I think in that sense, it's an ideal. Print is ideal for humans, where digital isn't always ideal for humans. It's I keep saying humans like I'm an alien,
Right.
but it's I think that's an important and nuanced thing. Like we have to adapt to work digitally in various ways. And I won't go into the ways. If you want, we could talk. Anyone wants to talk to me about it on Twitter. I mean, I'm willing to be dissuaded of any of my ideas. So please talk to me on Twitter after and tell me I'm an idiot. But, I firmly believe that humans are suited towards books.
Yeah.
And I think they're an important part of our culture and our our inner imaginative landscape.
Oh yeah, and they have been for years. I'm a bit of a history buff, and if you look, I mean, you can track the freedom of the world
Yes.
to movable type, and I mean, the French Revolution came about in part because of the American Revolution, but also, did I lose you again, or just your audio or your video?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm getting a call and I'm not there.
That's okay. I can still hear you. But in part to the encyclopedia. Encyclopedias came about. They disseminated information in a quick and easy way. The way that certain organizations and governments and churches used to control people was
Yeah.
to inhibit or make illegal their ability to read. And so books are much more than entertainment. Even when they're entertaining, I think they're an integral part of the human experience.
Yeah. Oh, I think so too. They've become part of our landscape, our architecture of who we are.
Yeah.
And computers and digital technology changes so rapidly that they don't have time to become part of our landscape or architecture. Like only a few years ago, there were no cell phones, no smartphones.
Right.
And we had desktops, and now, like, cell phones don't even look like they did a few years ago. Like, what's going to happen next? So it's sort of like we don't have sort of any consistency with our digital technology that we do with our analog technology. So it's yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think at some point it's going to be difficult to tell what humanity is, because there's just going to be cyborg type mixes. But those
Yeah.
those of us troglodytes that like books will be all right.
Yep.
So
I'll be a cyborg on a lonely hill reading a book.
right, exactly. With my robot legs, and
Yeah.
after the rest of me has fallen apart.
Smoking my robot pipe.
Right. Which are already here. I mean, vaping is already a thing. Oh, we lost Eric again. Sorry, guys. Let me just jump in one more time here. I'll have to figure out what's going on. Just gonna mute that while it's ringing. Okay. So as this goes on again, this is not quite picking up yet. We tested this out earlier, and it wasn't a problem. I'm going to try to call one more time here. And then maybe we'll wrap this up and try to do it another time when we don't have so many technical difficulties. There we go. Okay. All right, we're back, and let me jump to here and reframe. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's a good breaking point anyway. Before I start going into robotic dystopian futures, but I did have some questions. You have a Patreon, and on your Patreon you are sharing like many others, a lot of behind the scenes stuff. But one of the things that I find fascinating about your Patreon is that you are actually talking, instead of just saying, "Here, I drew something," which you're also doing. You're also going through and talking about your inspiration for your characters. For example, you had Bera. You related that to a close family member, and then is it the badger that you're working on? Is it Alda? Aldous, yeah. And Aldous, you related to kind of your current situation. Yeah, well, I find it fascinating, and I had a couple questions. You had mentioned that this character is me or my mom or so and so, but also isn't, and I find that really interesting that there's kind of an impetus, of loneliness or mothering or whatever aspect. How does that come about? Because you had described something that Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art talks about, where he says people asked him, because he's writing, he asked him like, what is it like to be alone all the time? And he said, well, I was a little confused at that question because I'm not. I'm with my characters, and they're way more interesting than I am or other people in my life. And if they weren't, I couldn't do this. And that whole concept of your characters, living inside of you or existing outside of you and something that you interact with, where is it that you are creating those characters? Where is it that they create themselves? And how much of that is inspired by kind of stuff that just happens, it just comes up, kind of inspiration, the muses, whatever you want to call that, and how much of that is calculated work? For example, I need this character to have this flaw for the story versus this is just how they seem to me.
It was I heard about it on. Do you know Dan Barry from the UK?
I
Uh,
don't.
Dan Barry has a great podcast called Make Then Tell, and he discussed this book several times on his podcast. And the book is called Into the Woods by a screenwriter in Hollywood called John Knowles, and he sort of collated and looked at many stories from fairy tales up through contemporary Hollywood film.
Oh, we lost Eric again. Okay, so sorry that I muted him. He's back. All right, guys. We're gonna try this. We're gonna try this one more time, and we might just have to call it. I'm gonna just mute this so you don't hear the ringing because it's super loud, and I'm gonna try to remember to unmute it so that we can actually hear what Eric is saying here. But man, we have struggled with the. Maybe it's Canada. Canada just doesn't like, doesn't want to cooperate. While you guys are in the chat, oh, hi Scott. If you guys have any questions, that would be awesome. And then I think we're gonna wrap it up here in a few minutes. I'd love to field any questions. I'm gonna try calling him one more time. I'd love to field any questions or anything that you guys have. Eric has a number of books out, both in children's books and in comics. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
We're back. You're sideways. That's okay.
Oh, let me fix. I can do it. I forgot.
There we go.
All right.
Oh, good.
Go. Okay.
Okay.
Can I just finish that thought?
Yeah, I'd love it.
Okay, so we all go out in the world wanting something, and like I think this is just true of human experience. And in the act of looking for our desire, we find out who we really are and what we really need. And I think that is sort of a universal experience, and it's embedded in most stories. And he even goes on to say things like, there's reversals of this, like Macbeth is a reversal of that tale, and that's also a common thing where people, or The Godfather is a reversal of the typical story where he goes out into the world and discovers he's a villain and decides to embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think of also Tolkien, who was a great disliker of direct metaphor in novels, because he wanted people to enjoy novels for what they were, meaning he just wanted people to get lost in the story and not concern themselves with technical details like theme. And so, like, for instance, people ask him, or insist that Sauron and the War of the Rings is a retelling of his experiences in World War One, or his son's experiences in World War Two. And what he says, I believe, and if he hasn't said it, someone else has pointed this out based on his own sensibilities, is that sure, there's an analogous connection between real world events and his stories, but that's not the point.
Right.
Stories are stories. Like, don't focus on those things, because the magic doesn't happen there.
Yeah.
The magic happens in the story itself. And I think this goes along with his whole philological stance on language and fairy tales as well, which is a whole other boring thing.
Well, I don't think it's boring for a lot of people, but yeah.
It's a good drunk conversation.
Right. Exactly. We've got another question in the chat.
Sure.
From Elvin again.
Okay.
Have you ever found young teenagers that fascinate you because of its works, art, stories? I think they're asking, are you ever inspired by or impressed by younger artists or writers?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, like I was saying earlier, like, some people just seem to be born with this incredible compositional sense, and if you just look at DeviantArt, it's just full of remarkable people who are, like, better than me. It's wonderful. It's so good. And I think, like, yeah, and well, I can't think of any names right now. I mean, I follow so many people on Twitter and Facebook now that are much younger than me, who are just doing the most remarkable, smart, empathetic, brilliant work.
Yeah.
That and the current generation, of course, like the younger generation right now, who are associated with social justice and just sort of ideas of privilege and justice and identity, are so smart. It's scary.
Yeah.
They're able to make connections through their art that I wish I could have, that would have really helped me at a younger age when dealing with my own issues and who I was. And I don't know why they're so smart. They just are. and brilliant. And there's lots of them. And I tend to write about younger people because the bravery of a young person in an adventure there's so much to discover there.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, we sort of stay in our younger selves to a certain degree. And Maurice Sendak said, I'm not a kid, but I've opened a pretty deep vein into my childhood.
Right.
And I think it's incumbent on all of us who work in kid lit to sort of not be kids, but sort of keep that open sense of the world, not get too cynical.
Oh, we lost Eric again. Okay. I think we'll try this. I think we'll try this one more time. I do want to get Eric's thoughts on publishing, because he's been published in a number of ways. Let's see if we can get him back here. I'm gonna mute him so we don't hear the ringing. Man, that is so loud. Okay. There we go. But he's been published a number of ways, both in comics and in children's books by larger publishers and smaller publishers. And so we'll jump into that here. Let me, sorry. Okay. There we go. Okay. And let me just shrink you down a bit so you fit into that square. There we go. Yeah, I was saying it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to talk about, and we'll kind of wrap it up. We've been going for a little while, but it'd be interesting to talk about publishing, because you've had quite a few experiences with publishing, as far as being published by big publishers and small publishers, and in two different fields, as well as comics and children's books. And mm-hmm. And what? So let me ask you this: what percentage of your year, any given year, and I'm sure this changes all the time, but what percentage of your year is either work for hire or work that you're commissioned to do, versus work that you are setting out and creating yourself, as far as, Matty Kettle or Bear, the One-Headed Troll, versus the Pirate book or something along those lines? Oh, wow.
Of work for hire. The editorial constraints are wild sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got a bit bored of it.
Yeah.
So I thought I would just try this for a while. Unfortunately, comics aren't viable in the same way. So I've had to rethink that now as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I want to go back to work for hire. So I'm thinking of doing different types of books myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm selfish and I don't like to collaborate that much all the time. Depending, I suppose, I could find a great collaborator, but so far I've just found it just the challenges aren't always worth it.
Right.
And it's affected the quality of the books in ways that I'm not happy with.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been very insistent on doing my own work the last 2 years. The last book I did for hire was about 3 years ago for a smaller publisher.
Yeah.
And I really didn't like the end result. And so I just thought, I don't want to embarrass myself. I've got to step away from this for a while and rethink this. And then soon after that, Patreon came out, and I thought, okay, I'll have a consistent revenue stream, and comics will pay for my life. Of course, they don't. So comics really don't pay much unless you're in the big two, which I have no idea because I've never done that. My work isn't suited to that. So
yeah. So and you don't have to. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, but I do commissions to make up for that. So I'd say about 90% of my year is my own books, and 10% is commissions. Mm-hmm. So even today, I just said I'm open for commissions again, and I'll be open for about a week, and then I'll shut down again just to work on my own stuff. So that's kind of how I do things.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
No, you're fine. I'm just curious, and you don't have to talk about real numbers if you don't feel comfortable doing that, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious on when and how the money comes through in these situations. So, for example, I'm probably 3 months out at the most of finishing this children's book that I've been working on for a little while, and then I'm going to start shopping it. I have no idea what I'm doing as far as getting it published, but I'm curious. You had mentioned in a conversation that we had offline, small publishers versus big publishers versus self-publishing. Take us through kind of when and how the money works in those different situations.
Okay, well, brace yourself to wait a while.
Okay.
Publishing is slow. I hate to say that, but it's slow, and the money is slow. So generally what happens is I'll pitch something, usually to someone I know. So I'll pitch it to someone working within the field, an editor who I'm friendly with and who is, amenable to the type of work I do, because not everyone is into what I do. So, I'll find someone who's into what I do, and I'll pitch it to them, and then
oh, we lost Eric again. All right. He was saying something really fascinating. Okay. I'm going to try to not the reason I keep muting him is because it's the ringing is so loud. So let me do this one more time here. I keep saying we're gonna do this one more time, but Eric keeps saying super interesting things, so I don't just want to end it. Sorry, let me mute that. Let me go there real quick. That is so loud. All right, this is live, guys. This is what. There we go. We're back.
To get me a good contract,
Eric, you cut off a little bit there. We just jumped back into the call.
Okay, do you want me to repeat anything?
Yeah.
Go into.
I lost you right after you said prepare to wait a while because it takes a long time.
Oh shoot. I did a whole spiel after that.
I know, and it was so good, and I feel so bad, but we keep getting cut off.
No, it's not good. I love the sound of my own voice. It doesn't necessarily make sense. So I'll do a pitch, so for comics, that's 20 to 30 finished pages, in outline, and thumbnails, and I'll pitch it to an editor who I know and who is friendly towards my work, because not everyone is going to be into my work, and that's just something you have to accept in the field, is that some people in the industry will be more into what you're doing than others, and that's cool. You just sort of don't let that hurt your ego, because that's just life, and that's going to be everyone. Editors are people. They're not always looking for stuff they think is cool. And then if the editor likes it enough to publish it, they take it to their bosses, and they have to pitch it again to the bosses. And if the bosses like it, then hooray, I got a contract. So I'll just go through my second contract a bit. This is what happened with my contract. So after I got the contract, I contacted my agent and said, Howard Morhaime, who was in Brooklyn, and Macmillan is in New York. So if you're wondering why publishers all live in New York, so it's easy. Everyone's connected.
Yeah.
So my agent and his lawyer did a long, like month or two long dissection of the contract. It's about a 20-page contract. They fought for certain rights for me. For instance, if a movie is made, I get I get better merchandising rights than I would have initially.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, right. And then they initially wanted to give me a certain amount. I won't give the initial amount, but I ended up getting 12 grand American, which is about, I don't know, 15 grand Canadian, as a advance. And then that was split in two. So I get the advance when I signed the contract, and then when the book is done. And the book took about 2 years. So that's about 7 grand for about 2 years of work. So I had to do other things. I worked teaching and stuff at the same time, and sold, sold commissions and stuff like that. So yeah, that's essentially the monetary structural side of it. Sometimes publishers will disappear for a very long time, and you have to sort of brace yourself for that. I don't know what's going on, but it's just what I've perceived as being typical in publishing. Editors will just disappear, and I think that seems to be common knowledge and accepted. And I think it's led in part to the self-publishing boom, because people could be so nimble in self-publishing,
right?
In a way that you can't be nimble working with a large publisher or even a small publisher. Small publishers will often have one big book that they have to put their attention towards, which becomes detrimental towards your book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And then how? I mean, assuming that I know Doug TeNapel has talked about this, where he tends to gravitate towards what he calls evergreen books that are, once he makes it, it sticks around forever. And so, getting $6,000 a year, obviously is not a livable income. But are you finding that as you get a number of these books out there, I think you said you've got 10 that have been published?
Yeah. Doug's really smart, but the problem is, how do you know what's an evergreen book? Like, maybe he has an eye for it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have one children's book, which is a regional bestseller out here on the East Coast. And that gives me a few grand every year. Just shows up. I don't know when. I'm like, wow, money. Awesome. I have yet to receive royalties for either Matty Kettle or Baron because the advance has still not.
Oh no, we lost him again. Okay, hold on. That was so good. Let me do this one more time, guys. Sorry. Let me throw that up there. I'll call him one more time. I'm in a video call, but Eric is not. Can we add Eric? Oh, that is so loud. How's the while you guys are here waiting? Oh, good. We're back. Okay, sorry. We might just be fighting the technology trolls too much here. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, you said that's surprising to me. You said that you hadn't received royalties on Matty Kettle yet. And that's because it hadn't caught up with the advance. Is that how that works, or?
That is, yeah. So I'm still waiting for them to catch up to the advance. I think Matty Kettle has sold about between 5,000 and 8,000 copies so far.
That's great.
And, I mean, in Canada, that's a bestseller.
Yeah.
In the States, that's lower mid-range.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just throwing the books out there, and I mean they're still selling, so that's something. But nothing's disappeared on me yet, which is good. I've had a few picture books disappear, and when I say I have 10 books out, I've done a number of them for flat fees.
Oh.
So they'll just give me $6,000, and I'll do a quick book, and that's led to so many issues because they'll want my fattest style, and I'm like, dude, like I can't do it if I'm not getting royalties. Like it's just I can't do that kind of work for you. It has to be pared down a bit, and that's been an issue with some editors.
Yeah.
So it's almost not worth it, although the money's nice when you do those flat fee books.
Right.
Corey, I gotta go in about 5, man. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this has been awesome.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're having a great conversation.
Yeah, but I don't want to keep you too long. I know we've been here for a while. I don't have anything else. I mean, we can wrap up now. I do want to give you an opportunity to to plug what you've got going on. I thought I was a patron of your Patreon for a while because I try to back as many people as I can, and I've been following you for years. But I found out that I wasn't. And so anybody who is watching this video, you need to go check that out because I backed, and you've got a couple different levels. They're really low, and you're getting a ton of stuff. And so, do you want to just talk for a minute about Patreon, and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, sure. Well, my Patreon is at Eric Orchard. I use it as a very important revenue stream to do work, especially between big contracts like right now. I post daily, sometimes multiple times a day. I charge once a month to my patrons, and I talk about process. I'm always open for questions on Patreon. I love to hear from people, and you'll just get lots of art, lots of ideas, and lots of conversation. And it's a wonderful thing. I love Patreon. So yeah, and if you can't afford to, like, even $1 a month is so good, it adds up. And if you feel like you can't afford to, just share my links. That's such a big help. Like, sharing on social media is awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree. So check Eric out on Patreon there. The link is at the bottom of his face the whole time, and will be in the description of this video. You can check my stuff out at kuretake.com, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram and everything else. Just want to thank Eric for coming out and fighting through the technical difficulties, and everybody in the chat. I didn't get to all of the questions. as you guys have seen, I've had to jump back and forth between things. But
hey, Cory, if
yeah.
if you want, you can send me questions on Twitter, and I could ask, they could answer directly, or
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if you are not following Eric on Twitter, then you need to do that, because he is one of the most interesting and down to earth people on Twitter as far as accessibility. You know, he doesn't act like a celebrity artist that is untouchable, and so get a hold of him and do that. If you have any further questions, absolutely, that would be great.
Thanks so much, Cory. I had a great conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on. I'm gonna play us out here on the intro music, and then I'll catch you just for a minute afterwards.
Sure.
Illo Talk Interviews.